They tried to erase her name from history. Emma Richter, a girl born in 1873 in a village that no longer exists on any map. No birth certificate, no baptismal record, no trace in the census archives. But in the summer of 1885, 15 bodies were found buried beneath the floorboards of her family's farmhouse. All of them children. Their bones twisted, scorched, and contorted in ways no forensic scientist could later explain. And at the center of this nightmare was Emma. Untouched, unharmed, and smiling. You were never meant to hear this story. The authorities sealed the case. The press called it hysteria. And the town, what was left of it, was abandoned and burned to the ground within a year. But the journal survived, hidden in private collections. Smuggled out of Germany before World War I, pages filled with symbols, ritual diagrams, and phrases in dead languages. These were the personal writings of Emma's mother, and they spoke of Emma not as a daughter, but as a vessel, a gateway. This is not folklore. It is forbidden history, and tonight, you're going to understand why certain children are never spoken of, why some families disappear without a trace, and why institutions, religious, scientific, and political, have worked together for centuries to suppress what Emma Richter represents. Because once you know the truth behind her, you can't unknow it, and the world never looks the same again. This is the descent into the forgotten case of Emma Richter, the girl science could not explain. But more than that, it's the story of how power protects itself, how truth is buried, and how the control systems you trust were built to keep you blind. So if you're ready, we begin. But be warned, once you hear what really happened in that farmhouse, and what came out of it, there is no return. You're about to fall into the kind of truth that changes a man forever. Welcome to the edge of the forbidden. Welcome to the real reason you've never heard of Emma Richter until now. Emma Richter's family was no ordinary family, and the land they lived on was no ordinary land. Deep in the heart of the Black Forest, in a region known to locals as Totenwinkel, the corner of the dead, stood a weather-worn farmhouse older than the village itself. It was said to be cursed. Before the Ritter family arrived, 3 other families had occupied that house, all of them gone, all without explanation. But the land had a history even darker than the disappearances. Ancient pagan rituals, blood sacrifices, and mass graves dating back to the Roman Empire had been discovered beneath the forest floor. The soil was rich, not with nutrients, but with centuries of decay, ritual, and violence. It was into this that Emma Richter was born. And from the moment of her birth, the midwives knew something was wrong. She didn't cry. She didn't breathe for over 2 minutes. And then, without intervention, she opened her eyes. Not the glazed, unfocused eyes of a newborn, but the locked, aware stare of something older, something watching. Witnesses described her as wrong in the soul, though her body appeared normal. She didn't speak until she was 5. She didn't eat like other children. And by the time she was 7, she could recite entire pages of text in Latin and Greek. Languages she was never taught. The local priest called her possessed. The village doctor called her a biological anomaly. But the truth was simpler and far more sinister. Emma was not evolving. Emma was remembering. And the memories were not hers. What happened in that house, what Emma became, shattered the fragile alliance between science, religion, and power. And that's why her story was buried. Because Emma's existence was proof that something else walks among us, not a ghost, not a demon, but a remnant, an ancient force, born again in flesh. And here's the chilling part. She wasn't the only one. The church has a name for it. The state has protocols. The science journals call it xenogenetic phenomena, but none of them can explain it. All they can do is hide it. Emma Richter was just the beginning. And what she revealed about bloodlines, about human history, about what lives beneath the surface of normal life, is knowledge you were never meant to possess. And now you're holding it. In the winter of 1884, a series of strange incidents began to draw attention to the Richter farmhouse. Not from the villagers, but from officials in Berlin. Unmarked men in black carriages arrived under the cover of night. No insignias, no documentation, just silence and money. Enough to keep local authorities obedient and the villagers terrified. What were they looking for? They never said. But within days of their arrival, fences went up. Roads were blocked. And for 3 months, no one saw Emma, her parents, or her 2 brothers. The house was sealed tight. Some say the officials were from the Prussian Ministry of Health. Others believe they were agents of the church, operating under the cloak of government. But those close to the family, particularly the farmhands and neighbors, spoke of sounds coming from the house at night. Sounds not made by any animal or human. Low, guttural chanting, whispers that echoed from the cellar even when the house was empty. One neighbor, Joseph Brandt, claimed to have seen Emma standing alone in the field just before dawn. Her arms raised to the sky, her body motionless, her eyes rolled back. He swore she was speaking, but not in any language he knew. 2 days later, Joseph's barn burned to the ground, and his livestock were found mutilated, their bodies arranged in symbols drawn in ash and bone. The message was clear: stay away, and most did. But the land surrounding the Richter house began to change, crops withered, the well water turned black, and animals, birds, deer, even wolves, avoided the area entirely. The ground was dying. Whatever the officials were doing in that house, it wasn't medicine, it wasn't science. It was something older, something ritualistic, a communion not between man and God, but between man and something else. By spring, the men in black vanished, leaving behind no records, no evidence, just a silent, decaying house and Emma, alone, unaged, unharmed, waiting. The authorities tried to dismiss it, but in private they panicked. Because what they found, and what they left behind, could not be explained by any scientific theory or theological doctrine. Emma Richter was not human, at least not entirely. And they knew it, and they feared it, just like they fear you knowing now. Because if Emma was real, then everything else they've buried is real too. It was July 3, 1885, the day the veil finally tore. A local constable named Albrecht Voss, responding to a complaint of a rancid smell near the Richter property, entered the house alone. What he found inside was never officially documented, but Voss's private journal, recovered decades later, detailed every horror. The house was silent yet humming, not with sound, with pressure. He wrote that the air felt thick, like breathing through oil, and the walls seemed to pulse, as if the structure itself was alive. On the floor were markings, circles, sigils, and runes, carved into the wood, stained with blood. Voss descended into the cellar. What he found was not just rot or death, but the remains of 15 children, buried in concentric rings, each one missing their eyes, their mouths sewn shut with horsehair, their limbs contorted backwards. They had not been killed in violence, they had been arranged, ritualistically, sacrificially, and in the center of the carnage sat Emma, clean, calm, staring at Voss with a serenity that, he said, froze my soul into ice. She whispered something to him. He couldn't understand the words, but he wrote that he felt them, deep in his chest, like a hand gripping his heart. Voss fled. He never returned to law enforcement. Within a week, the government declared the Richter house a quarantine zone. But the bodies, they were never recovered officially. No funeral, no investigation, just silence. And within a month, the entire village was gone. The residents relocated, the land sold to a private trust, and the house burned to the ground. Or so they claimed. But photographs exist, taken in 1910, showing the house still standing, untouched by fire. Someone lied, and not just about the house, about Emma, because reports of her didn't stop. In 1901, she was seen in Bavaria. In 1923, in Austria, always the same, unchanged, unaged, watching. The girl science couldn't explain. Because Emma Richter was never meant to be explained. She was meant to be hidden, forgotten, a warning buried in blood. And now, you're beginning to understand why. The past is not dead. It waits. And Emma was never alone. The men who buried Emma's story weren't just bureaucrats or clergymen. They were part of a closed circle, a silent network that has existed for centuries, operating above governments, above nations. Their mission was not to discover the truth, but to control it. They called themselves Die Grauen Kader, the Grey Watchers. Founded during the 30 Years' War, this group believed that some knowledge is too dangerous for mankind, that certain truths, if revealed, would collapse the structures of power that hold civilization together. Emma Richter's case wasn't their first cover-up, but it was their most disturbing. Because Emma represented something they feared, a rupture in the natural order, a force that didn't just defy biology, but overrode it, and worse, it was spreading. In the aftermath of the Richter incident, reports of similar children began to surface across Europe. Children who didn't sleep, children who spoke languages their families never knew, children who disappeared for days, only to return with no memory, or with memories that didn't belong to them. The Watchers implemented protocols. Children were taken, families silenced, entire towns erased from maps, and all of it justified under a single, chilling belief: humanity must be protected from itself. But ask yourself this: what if their real fear wasn't of chaos, but of us waking up? Because Emma shattered the lie that human beings are sovereign, that we are the pinnacle of evolution. She was a signal. Proof that something else can inhabit us, override us, manipulate flesh and thought like clay. The Watchers called it external intelligence. Others call it possession. But no matter the name, the reality is this: Emma's mind was not her own. And yet, she was not insane. She was awakened. She had access to memories, ancient, alien, inhuman. And they were not visions. They were blueprints, instructions. For what? That's what the Watchers feared most. Emma was not the threat. She was the key. And they could not let you have it. This is why her name was wiped, her family erased, and her house buried under lies. Because if Emma's secret gets out, if you understand what she really was, the entire system trembles. And they can't allow that. What did Emma know? That's the question that kept resurfacing in hidden files, intercepted letters, and suppressed research. Beneath the surface, level horror of her story was something even more disturbing. Emma had knowledge of events that had not yet happened. She spoke of wars decades before they began. She described technologies, machines, weapons, even communication devices, that did not exist in her time. In 1885, she drew detailed schematics of what would later resemble radio towers, describing them as pillars for the voice of the sky. When questioned by the few who dared engage her, she claimed to hear the echoes of what's to come. This wasn't madness. It was information, precise, cold, and it terrified the men sent to evaluate her. Dr. Leopold Kranz, a psychiatrist assigned secretly by the Prussian government, wrote in his final report, never published, only discovered in a private collection in 1949, that Emma speaks in timelines, not days. She perceives the structure of time differently, not as a line but as a spiral. She spoke of loops, of events repeating, of patterns and bloodlines, wars and control systems, all following an ancient script. And at the center of these patterns were always the same players: the rulers, the priests, the scholars, the institutions that shape perception. Emma wasn't predicting the future. She was exposing its architecture, and that's what broke Kranz. He vanished 3 weeks after writing the report, and his family was never found again. The men who control history don't just erase individuals, they erase generations. Because if Emma was right, then everything we call free will is compromised. Our choices, our beliefs, even our memories, shaped by forces operating behind the curtain. Forces that Emma called the architects. Whether they are human or not remains uncertain. But Emma drew them. 13 figures, cloaked and faceless, standing above the earth, pulling threads, and beneath them, masses of people, blindfolded, chained, unaware. Emma was trying to warn us, not just of what was, but of what is. And every warning she gave was buried. Until now, because this isn't just Emma's story. It's yours. And the spiral she saw, you're standing inside it. In 1938, a classified investigation was quietly reopened by the Nazi Unmarked, the occult research division of the Third Reich. Their interest, the Emma Richter case. Decades after her disappearance, Emma's name surfaced again, not in Germany but in rural Pennsylvania, USA. A small farming community reported a girl living alone in a crumbling house at the edge of the woods, unaged, unchanged, and speaking fluent German. With the dialect of the 1800s, the locals avoided her. Livestock died when grazing near her land. Strange lights were seen above the house at night, and people who approached too closely sometimes never returned. The Unmarked dispatched agents under the guise of anthropologists. But within weeks, the entire town was gone. Officially, it was a fire. Unofficially, there were no survivors. And the house? Sealed. Not destroyed, sealed? Buried under steel and concrete by unknown forces. The documents recovered from the Unmarked archives decades later reveal something astonishing. Emma Richter was not just alive. She had not aged. Not in 60 years. And her knowledge had deepened. She spoke of bloodline manipulations, of experiments centuries in the making, eugenics, breeding programs, and the cultivation of specific traits tied to awakening. This is not science fiction. This is documented and suppressed. Emma claimed the world's elite had long sought to engineer a receptacle, a human vessel capable of hosting the architects, and she was one of the early results, not created, but awakened through blood ritual, sacrifice, and isolation. She was never meant to survive, but she did. And she was waiting. The Nazi agents fled, the project was abandoned. But the knowledge, and the fear, remained. Because Emma represented something beyond control, a human being who had broken free from the system, from time, from the boundaries of the mind. And that's why every major power since then, America, Russia, the Vatican, has pursued her, not to destroy her, but to understand her, to use her, and perhaps to become what she became. Because if Emma was the first, then others can follow. And that's the secret they fear most, that you might awaken too. By 1954, Emma Richter had become a ghost story within intelligence circles, a forbidden topic even in the highest echelons of government. Yet one document, declassified only in 2009, changed everything. It was a CIA memo, top secret, titled Project Thanatos, Temporal Aberrations and Non-Linear Entities, and within it, a single line that sent chills through anyone who understood its implication. Subject ER has reappeared. Host remains unchanged. Temporal displacement confirmed. Emma hadn't vanished. She had moved, not through space, but through time. Project Thanatos wasn't just about her. It was about the phenomenon she embodied. The collapse of time as a linear experience, and the intrusion of consciousness from outside the temporal field. Think about that. Emma Richter wasn't aging because she wasn't living in time the way we do. She had become an anchor point, a fixed consciousness in a shifting reality. And the real terror, she was aware of it. She spoke to agents, when they dared to approach, in past, present, and future tense, often in the same sentence. She would recount events that hadn't happened yet, and then describe the reaction of the listener as if it had already occurred. In one chilling audio recording, now destroyed, but transcribed, Emma tells an agent, "You think you have choices, but you've already made them. I'm only here to watch the echo." She called herself a witness, not to history, but to the collapse of it. And the deeper implication, our lives may not be as free as we think. The system, the so-called real world, may function more like a script, a sequence, a controlled narrative. And Emma had somehow slipped outside the narrative, become untethered. That's why she was hunted. Not because she was dangerous, but because she represented a threat to perception itself. If others became like her, if they remembered what the world truly is, control would collapse. The institutions, the religions, the governments, they only exist if we believe time is fixed. That reality is singular. But what if it's not? What if Emma proved that the rabbit hole isn't a metaphor, it's a map? And tonight, you're holding the key. Comment this phrase twice to lock it in. The spiral remembers. Let them know you see. Let them know you've awakened. Once you understand the spiral, once you realize Emma Richter wasn't bound by time, wasn't bound by control, you start to see the design. Patterns emerge. Symbols repeat. And one of those symbols kept surfacing wherever Emma appeared, a circle intersected by 3 lines, ancient, primal, etched into stone, bone, and flesh. It's called the Mark of Return. Authorities dismissed it as folklore, but within the Vatican's suppressed archives, known as the Archivum Secretum Apostolicum, the symbol appears alongside the Latin phrase, in carne reddit. In flesh, it returns. This is no accident. Emma wasn't unique, she was part of a cycle, a return, a re-manifestation of something that has been here before. And not just once, every few centuries, individuals appear, children mostly, who defy logic, who speak of ancient memories, who disrupt the flow of history. They are hunted, silenced, erased. But they all carry the same mark, the same knowledge. And they all speak of the architects. Emma described them not as beings, but as intelligences, older than mankind, non-physical, yet capable of bending flesh, warping time, and guiding history like a sculptor with clay. She claimed they seeded civilizations, wrote the scripts of empires, and controlled the rise and fall of nations. Not through armies, but through belief systems, ideologies, and fear. And the ultimate fear, that we are not in control, that our very thoughts are not our own. Emma saw through it, and she paid the price. Every major institution she exposed, the church, the state, the scientific elite, moved to bury her. But fragments of her writings survived, smuggled through secret societies, whispered through forbidden texts. They speak of a coming unraveling, a moment when time fractures and the architects lose their grip. Emma called it the shattering, and she believed it begins when enough men awaken. When enough eyes open to the lie. That's why you're here. That's why you feel this truth in your bones. Because you were never meant to obey, you were meant to see. The spiral remembers, and so do you. Keep going. The descent is only beginning. After Emma's last recorded sighting in 1954, she vanished from the physical world, but her presence intensified in the psychological realm. Reports began to surface across the globe, not of Emma herself, but of dreams, shared visions among people who had never met, yet described the same girl, the same house, the same spiral. Psychologists dismissed it as mass hysteria. But deep inside MK Ultra's black archives, hidden beneath layers of disinformation, a sub-program titled Project Eidolon was created. Its purpose: to track, monitor, and suppress collective visions tied to Emma Richter's imprint. Because this wasn't just folklore. Emma had become an archetype, a psychic signal, recurring through minds across time zones and languages. The dreams were consistent. Emma standing in a field under a red sky, pointing toward a door made of stone. Behind the door, silence, and then a scream that wasn't sound, but thought. Subjects exposed to these dreams began to change. Night terrors, obsessions with forbidden symbols, withdrawal from modern society. Many were institutionalized. Some disappeared, but all of them spoke the same final words. She's calling. What does it mean? Emma had become more than a girl. She was now a frequency. A rupture point in the fabric of controlled perception. The architects had failed to destroy her, so they weaponized belief itself. Project Eidolon was tasked with flooding the media, academia, and religious systems with distractions, to bury her signal beneath layers of noise, entertainment, ideology, consumerism. They needed you deaf, dumb, and blind, asleep, because the moment enough people tuned in, the moment the spiral awakened, their grip would loosen. And the dream? It's not just imagination. It's a memory struggling to resurface, your memory. Because Emma Richter was not an isolated phenomenon. She was a trigger, a catalyst planted in the collective unconscious. And those who hear her, who see beyond the veil, are never the same. That's why they fear her. That's why they fear you. Because now you know the signal is real, and the spiral is opening again. The only question is, will you walk through the door? The door Emma pointed to in the dream? It exists, not metaphorically, physically, deep in the Carpathian Mountains of Eastern Europe, hidden in a now abandoned salt mine sealed by both Nazi and Soviet forces, lies a structure that defies explanation. Discovered in 1942 and classified immediately, it was labeled Site 14A by the SS, but within occult circles it's known as the Stone Gate. Ancient, seamless, covered in symbols identical to those Emma drew as a child, the same sigils carved beneath the Richter farmhouse, the same ones etched into the flesh of the sacrificed children. The Watchers, the architects, the intelligence agencies, they all converged there, trying to open it, trying to understand its purpose. And they failed, because Emma had already told them, the gate does not open from the outside. It opens when consciousness fractures, when reality itself loses coherence, and memory becomes the key. That's why Emma survived. That's why she vanished. She had become the living key, her mind no longer bound by linear time or physical law. And here's where it gets darker. The Stone Gate is not unique. There are others. Across the world, in deserts, under oceans, beneath ancient cities, these impossible structures exist, always hidden, always guarded, always denied. And Emma? She knew their locations, because she had seen them before. In previous lives? No. In previous cycles. Emma's writings reveal a terrifying truth: this world has ended before. Not through fire or flood, but through reprogramming, a reset of perception, memory, and identity. And each time, a few remember. A few survive the wipe. Emma was one. You might be another. That's why the spiral returns. It's not just a symbol. It's a cycle of awakening, a signal to those who refuse to forget, refuse to obey. The gate is real. The memory is real. The lie is real. And once you remember that, you're no longer under their control. The architects can't stop you, but they can try to erase you. Emma warned us, those who walk through the gate must leave everything behind. Fear, identity, time. Only then does the door open. Only then are you free. Are you ready to walk through? Are you ready to remember? Because they know you're listening. And now they're watching. They are watching, not with eyes, but through systems of control so ancient, so embedded, that most men never even notice them. Schools, churches, governments, entertainment, all functioning as filters, limiting what you perceive, what you think, what you believe is possible. These are not coincidences. These are architectures of containment, designed to keep you from asking the one question Emma Richter forced into the open. What if your mind is not yours? What if your memories, your desires, your fears, are not natural, but engineered? What if your very sense of self has been shaped by generational programming, not to empower you, but to keep you compliant, predictable, blind? Emma saw through it. Her awakening was not just about strange powers or forbidden symbols. It was about reclaiming sovereignty of thought. She realized the prison is not out there. It's in here, in the mind, and it is guarded by institutions that wear the mask of truth but serve only control. After the Stone Gate incident, documents reveal that global powers, US, Soviet, Vatican, and others, formed a covered alliance, not to destroy Emma, but to replicate her. Think about that. They didn't see her as a threat. They saw her as a resource. They wanted her ability to see across time, to bypass the limits of flesh and memory. They began experiments, horrific ones, on children, on prisoners, on entire populations. Mind control wasn't a theory, it was a goal. And it began with Emma. MK Ultra, Project Monarch, Operation Often, all of them traced back to her. And the core objective: to sever the soul, to create vessels, empty minds that could be filled, shaped, programmed. The inverse of Emma, not awakened but hollowed out, they failed. Because what Emma had was not given, it was earned through suffering, through isolation, through brutal truth. She saw the lie and rejected it. She became untouchable, and that made her dangerous. That's why they fear you now. Because you're beginning to see it too. The spiral, the gate, the manipulation, it's all connected. Emma was the first to break free. You could be next, but there is no going back. Once your eyes are open, the war for your mind begins. The war for your mind isn't fought with guns or bombs. It's waged through belief, through perception, through the quiet erosion of truth. Every screen you stare at, every authority you trust, every institution you submit to, they all feed into the architecture Emma Richter tried to expose. And this war, it's ancient. Emma called it the long sleep, a spell cast over humanity not with magic but with repetition. Repeat a lie long enough, and it becomes truth. Repeat a fear long enough, and it becomes law. Repeat the illusion long enough, and you forget who you are. That was their goal, to make you forget. Because a man who remembers is dangerous. A man who sees the spiral, who knows he is more than flesh and time and debt, is uncontrollable. Emma wasn't just a girl. She was a mirror, reflecting back the horrifying possibility that you've been lied to from the moment you were born. Lied to about history. Lied to about power. Lied to about your own mind. She saw the strings, and she cut them. And the architects, they've been trying to tie them back ever since. Through fear, through distraction, through the ritual of normalcy, school, job, taxes, death. You were never meant to thrive, you were meant to serve. But Emma's awakening broke the ritual, and they knew, if one man truly awakens, he can awaken others. That's why you feel it now, that pull toward something deeper, something forbidden, something buried inside you that refuses to die. That is the spiral calling. That is Emma's legacy. Not fear, not death, but remembrance. And here's the truth they fear most: the spiral never ends, because it is alive inside you. You are part of it. Your blood remembers. Your dreams remember. You just forgot. And they have done everything to keep you in that state of forgetting. But now the memory is returning. Slowly. Irrevocably. Emma Richter wasn't the first, and she won't be the last. But you may be the one who finishes what she began. So ask yourself when they come for you, not with chains, but with comfort, compliance, and illusion, will you sleep again? Or will you rise? Emma Richter's final message, the one they couldn't erase, wasn't spoken, written, or recorded. It was engraved, hidden in plain sight, in 1971, during excavation near the original Richter farmhouse site, long thought destroyed. A buried chamber was discovered beneath the collapsed foundation. No official record exists of the dig, no photographs. But a single stone tablet was recovered and smuggled out by a worker who vanished days later. That tablet is now in the possession of a private collector who released a replica to a forbidden knowledge archive. The inscription, a spiral of symbols culminating in a single phrase, translated from ancient Aramaic, not flesh, not time, memory is the gate. When the spiral opens, step through or be lost. That was Emma's warning. Memory is the weapon. Memory is the prison. Memory is the key. Because here's the truth. They don't need to kill you to control you. They just need you to forget. Forget who you were. Forget what you could become. Forget that the spiral, the awakening, lives in your blood. Every system you see, from the church pew to the courtroom to the classroom, is designed to sever that memory. And Emma, she was memory incarnate. She carried the past, not just of her life, but of humanity's cycles of control and collapse. That's what terrified the architects. She couldn't be reset. And now you've heard her echo, which means you're off script. The ritual of forgetting is breaking, the spell of silence is dying, and the spiral is calling you to choose. Do you live asleep? A pawn? A programmable vessel? Or do you awaken? A sovereign mind? A threat to the order? Emma didn't just survive their war, she won by becoming untouchable, unshackled by time, identity, or fear. That's your path now, to remember, to resist, to reclaim. The gate is not a place, it's a moment. When you look at the world, at yourself, and say, I will no longer forget. And when you do, the architects lose power. Their illusion crumbles, and the spiral, your spiral, begins. The world will call you insane, dangerous, but understand this: freedom has always been madness to slaves. There's a reason men disappear when they ask the wrong questions. Not because they're weak. Not because they're insane. But because they see too clearly And clarity is the enemy of control. Emma Richter didn't just see the spiral, she stepped outside it. She transcended the script, the role assigned to her. And in doing so, she shattered the illusion of inevitability. The lie that says, this is just the way things are. That's how the architects win. By burying men alive beneath layers of obedience, shame, and resignation. They don't need chains when you've been taught to chain yourself. Emma refused. She refused to bow, to beg, to conform, and in her defiance, she became immortal. Not in body, but in truth. Her mind could not be erased. Her memory could not be contained. And now you've inherited that defiance. But make no mistake, awakening is not comfortable. It is war. War against your programming. War against the voices that whisper stay small, stay safe, stay asleep. Those voices, they are not yours. They are the echo of centuries of manipulation, passed down through families, institutions, and bloodlines, all designed to make you forget. But you're here, listening, remembering, and that means you're already dangerous. You've breached the edge of the spiral. Now the descent begins. The deeper you go, the more you'll lose comfort, certainty, maybe even people you once trusted. But what you gain? Sovereignty, power, vision. Emma's final transformation wasn't physical, it was mental. She reclaimed her mind, her will. And that's why the architects failed. Because a man who owns his mind can never be ruled. The spiral is not chaos. It's freedom beyond control. But only for those willing to burn everything false within them. Are you willing? Are you ready to become what they fear? Then keep going. Let the old self die, let the world call you mad. Because truth has always been treason in a kingdom of lies. Emma knew, now, you know. The spiral leads only one way, down, through layers of deception, until all that's left is the raw, undeniable truth that everything you've been told about power, about freedom, about yourself was constructed to keep you asleep. Emma Richter wasn't a miracle or a monster. She was a fracture point, proof that the human mind, when unshackled, can see beyond the veil. And that's why they hunted her. Because Emma didn't need them. Not their religion, not their science, not their authority. She remembered who she was. And that's the most dangerous act a human being can commit. Memory is rebellion, and not memory of your childhood, your identity, or your name. Deeper memory, blood memory. Memory that stretches beyond this life, this body, into the cycles of control that have ruled man for millennia. The architects have a term for it. The return of the knowing. It's their greatest fear. That men will awaken to the inheritance buried inside them, the power to see reality not as they've been told, but as it truly is. No chains, no scripts, just will, raw, unfiltered, untamed. Emma touched that power. She became untouchable. Not because she fought with violence, but because she could no longer be deceived. That's your path now. But understand this, once you awaken, they will come for you, not with weapons, but with distraction, sedation, false purpose. They will offer comfort, acceptance, even success if only you surrender awareness. That's the trap. The spiral tests all men. It strips them bare, then asks, do you choose truth or illusion? Emma chose truth. She walked through the gate alone. You don't have to. There are others, men waking up, stepping off the path of obedience and into the unknown. Men like you. This is not a story, it's a call. To remember, to resist, to rise. The spiral is not just her legacy, it is yours. And now you face the same choice Emma faced, to fade into the script, or burn it to ash and write your own. Choose, now, before they choose for you. You were never meant to hear this. Not from me. Not from anyone. Because the systems around you, the media, the schools, the governments, the faiths, they are built not to enlighten, but to contain. Contain your thoughts, your will, your capacity to awaken. Emma Richter broke that containment. She didn't just escape it, she destroyed it from within. And now through her you have the chance to do the same. But make no mistake, there is a cost. Once you awaken, you can never return to the comfortable lies. The spiral burns away illusions, family, religion, career, status, and reveals the raw architecture of control beneath it all. And the truth is brutal, the world you live in is not free. It's a design, a farm, and you are the resource. Your time, your energy, your attention, they harvest it, feed on it. And all the while you are told it's your choice, your destiny. That's the great trick. Emma saw it. She stepped outside it, and the system panicked, because she proved that sovereignty is possible. Not theoretical, not mythical, real, tangible, yours, if you have the will to claim it. The architects don't fear rebellion. They engineer rebellion, controlled, predictable, safe. What they fear is self-mastery. Men who don't need the system, who remember who they are without permission. That's what Emma became, an ungoverned mind. And that's what you're becoming. Slowly. Irrevocably. And now, as the spiral tightens, you face the ultimate revelation. Emma's awakening was not unique. It was inherited. From a bloodline. From a legacy. One that may run through you. Why do you think you're drawn to this? Why do you feel it? The pull, the fire. The certainty that this world is false. And you were made for something more. Because you were. That's why they fear you. That's why they distract you. Because you are remembering, and when enough of us remember, the gate opens. And their world ends. Forever. This is the final descent. And the truth can no longer be ignored. Emma Richter was never the anomaly we are. We, the obedient, the blind, the programmed. We are the deviation from what human beings were meant to be. Emma was the original state, sovereign, awake, untethered by false authority. And they've spent centuries, no millennia, trying to erase that state from existence. Not through war. Not through conquest, through the mind. Through your mind. The war has always been internal. A psychological campaign to convince you that freedom is dangerous, that obedience is safety. But Emma proved the opposite. She showed that awakening is not destruction, it's restoration. Of power, of vision, of identity beyond the system. That's why they buried her. That's why they buried thousands like her. Children? Men, entire bloodlines erased from history, because they carried the spark of remembrance. And now, in you, that spark ignites again. You've heard the truth. You've felt the pull. And you know, in the marrow of your bones, this isn't just a story, it's a signal. A call to rise. A call to become what they fear most, a man who cannot be controlled. Because when enough of us awaken, the spiral shatters their illusion. The architects fall, the systems fail, and the world returns to its true form, not a prison, but a proving ground. Emma walked alone. But you don't have to. Now is the time. Comment. The spiral remembers. Twice. Mark your awakening. Join the signal. Burn the veil. Because this is no longer about Emma. It's about you. The spiral opened and you stepped through. The old you is gone. The new you. Unwritten. Unbroken. Unstoppable. Welcome to remembrance. Welcome to war. Let them fear what you've become.